We are going to get started with the April 25th, 2012 meeting of the City of Eugene Budget Committee. Hopefully our last meeting for this budget cycle. I don't know if you have printed agendas before you, but basically we're scheduled to start at 7 and end at 9, and we'll probably take a short break in the middle of that. You should have before you proposed motions on one side, and then a list of the motions that we've already considered, both ones we passed and ones that did not pass, I believe, on the back side. So what we're going to do is we're going to take up these motions in the order that they are on this sheet. Then hopefully that won't take us too long into the meeting, and then we'll talk a little bit about follow-up on, if I want to give time, if we have time, to talk a little bit about this budget process, particularly for city councilors and folks who've been on before, and maybe give a little bit of feedback to city staff. But city staff is also going to be preparing a survey to send out to you all to get feedback about the budget process as well. And we'll talk about some other business towards the end of the meeting. So before you have a proposed motion that comes from Councilor Pryor, and it is one motion with two parts. And I will give I'll let Councilor Pryor start and have the floor to speak to this motion and see if you get a second.
Great. Thank you very much. After our last meeting, we went back to the drawing board. I was not hearing that there was a lot of opposition to the notion of finding some money to underwrite this portion of the LCOG budget, but there was some concern about the sources. So working with the city manager, we actually went back and thought there might actually be a motion that could be crafted that would not only take care of the LCOG funding, but could also deal in a little bit more effective way with the LRAPA funding, so we could kind of get both of those accomplished. So what I'll be doing is proposing a single motion that will fund the portion of the LCOG funds, but will also refocus the LRAPA funding in a way that still has the same net effect. When it's all said and done, LRAPA will receive exactly what we were proposing to do before, but it will be done in a little bit slightly different way. So if you will, I will go ahead and put that motion on the table, and then we can go from there. So in lieu of the motion approved by the Budget Committee on April 18th concerning LRAPA, I move to amend the proposed budget as follows. One, to reduce the council contingency by $31,000 to fund LCOG. This would leave $47,000 remaining in the council contingency. And two, to allocate to LRAPA $30,000 from the savings resulting from the temporary closure of the Sheldon Pool, with another $25,000 provided through in-kind contributions contingent on pro rata participation by Lane County and Springfield. If the city is unable to provide that in-kind contribution to LRAPA, then the city manager will propose funding for that $25,000 as part of Supplemental Budget 1.
Second.
All right. Would anyone like to comment, discuss this proposed motion? All right, John, and then Councilor Zelenka.
My only question would be, the county did come out with their budget yesterday. Has anybody had a chance to look and see what their status of the the LRAPA funding is proposed?
I believe it's zero.
I just downloaded it, but I haven't looked at it.
Do you have an answer, Councilor?
Well, there's no dollars allotted
Okay.
for this, but the recommendation from the Budget Committee, from the LRAPA Budget Committee, was to look at in-kind donations, which isn't like dollar amount, and we haven't heard back yet from Lane County's representation, which is, I forgot his name, the county commissioner, not Bosevich. Okay. He seemed pretty confident that him and both Councilor Ralston were really looking to see if they could continue to provide support for LRAPA through in-kind donations.
Councilor Zelenka?
I just want to thank Councilor Pryor for going back to the drawing board and come up with a motion that that I could support.
manager too.
And thank the staff for helping with that.
Anyone else have any comments, questions? Councilor Pryor, you get the last word before we call the question.
I'd like to just move ahead if we
All
can.
right. So all those in favor of the motion which appears up on the screen there, please raise your hand.
Okay, yeah, I saw that on.
It looks as if it passes unanimously. Yep, none opposed?
That's better.
Excellent. All right, let's keep this going.
Momentum.
So I do want to say our motions this evening are not limited to the ones that appear on the piece of paper in front of you. So if anyone still has a motion that they're considering and want to put forward, there is still time. But John Borowski has brought forward two motions, and we'll take those one at a time. Next, so John, if you want to speak to and propose the intended motion that's labeled Motion 1 on this sheet.
Sure, thank you. And the second one, I'm not sure if it actually needs a motion, but we'll discuss it when we get to it. Move to recommend that the city council that $100,000 of the FY13 marginal beginning working capital in the general fund, after the $900,000 transfer to the general capital projects fund, is transferred to the Parks Department as a one-time allotment for O&M.
I'll second.
Okay. Basically, this is similar to a motion that I put forward last year. The marginal beginning working capital is kind of the leftover money that is there after they close the books at the end of the year. They look and say, how much is left. So it's not money that was already designated for reserves. It would go into reserves if it's not allocated some other way. So that is a consideration to be thought of here. It's one-time money. This is for an area of the city's budget that I'm sure even the city manager would agree to has significant challenges and needs, especially with the snowstorm that we just went through. There are several one-time broken trees that I know in the parks near my neighborhood. So I was just hoping to help shore up that budget for that operation and maintenance of parks with $100,000. We did this last year, and that money got reallocated to help defer the costs of the Occupy Eugene. So to me, this is kind of keeping with putting the promises that we gave to the citizens last year that we were going to put some money towards parks and roads. I didn't put the roads one in this year because I believe that there's still a portion of that left for the roads that we had talked about last year. So that's the intent of the motion, and I'm willing to answer any questions or have the vigorous discussion about it.
Boy, what a quiet group this evening.
Well, we are because, we're a little meeting out here. This council is anyway. So do I understand that you think that there's money left in the operating capital? Is that where you're finding this?
The marginal beginning. So the marginal beginning working capital. So it basically would be allocated in SB1. When they come back in SB1 and say, we closed the books and there's $2.4 million left, the city manager would come to it with whatever needs he thinks and adjustments there are, and then the rest of that usually goes into the reserve for revenue shortfalls. So it would be out of that, and it's one-time money that would be used one time for backlog of maintenance in the parks.
Okay. But
That far. No.
Councilor Farr and then city manager.
Just for historical purposes, what the beginning or the carryover, what amount is that historically? Do we have an approximate amount?
It varies.
It varies widely, but
Was it this year?
In the last couple of years, I know we've been able to at least put the $900,000 into it. It can be a couple $1 million, just depending on the.
but it flows back and forth. Okay.
What was it last year? I don't remember what it was last year.
$2.8 million. Approximately.
Some free staff right there.
Well, there we go. Thank you, John.
Approximately.
Yeah.
We had a bet on that. So that's nice.
Just a real quick clarification. I just want to make sure we know, our intent would be on the El Rapa side, if there's still money to collect on that El Rapa, that $25,000 would be our first kind of in line, and then we'd pick up the 900 and then this. Just, I want to just.
And that would be fine. That would be fine with me too. It's just, I don't want to go ahead of needs that are there and already spoken for.
So just to clarify, so that means that this 100,000 would be kind of priority number 3, based, depending on the size of whatever's left in beginning working capital.
Yes.
One being the 900,000, then El Rapa, and then.
Right.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? Counselor Taylor?
What kind of maintenance would be done?
Well, last year when I made the motion and put it forward, I think there's just, I mean, we could talk to the people from Parks and Maintenance, but I think there's plenty of one-time, like, monies, you know, whether it's fixing a restroom or a bench or something like that. Not ongoing maintenance, but just, you know, something that needs to be fixed and there's really not the money this year to do it. And I would leave it up to staff to decide the best use of that money.
And there would be a variety, just like John says, there would be a variety of minor capital kinds of projects in and around the parks that this money could be used for. So it would be used into a good purpose.
Anything else, Counselor Taylor?
Oh, thanks.
Counselor Zelenka?
So we had a presentation a while back last year to the council about the O&M deficit in the parks. That was pretty substantial. I can't remember exactly how much it is. I remember it being well in excess of $1 million a year that is needed to just maintain the parks that we already have, much less monies that we need to develop parks that are undeveloped or underdeveloped. And this would be helpful, but it's really only a drop in the bucket. We really need to have a source of funding to be able to fund the ongoing parks and the development of our parks to make them more useful for folks. So I'd be supportive of this. It's a good start, but we need like 15 of these.
Yeah. Mark?
I have a question. Is the city, as part of their open space and parks plan, still in the acquisition mode for additional park and open space land? And if so, where is the money for those acquisitions come from?
Depending on how much detail you need, there are bond measures that have been passed in the past, which has still money in those accounts to use for ongoing acquisition of different park lands. And so there is money still left for a variety of park lands.
But that money can only be used for acquisition,
Right.
not
Correct,
for the
yes.
maintenance.
So, and it's not earmarked for particular land, is that right?
Not earmarked, but we have a plan.
There's certain priorities and types of lands,
Right.
I believe, that are a part of that.
Like a Northside Regional Park.
Right.
where
Like
you-
the Amazon headwaters.
Yeah, that's not actually in the
Yeah.
plan.
Old habits.
I'm doing the cue.
Were you done, Mark?
Forgot which year it was.
Okay. Ken?
I'm afraid I'm going to expose my ignorance here, but I'm going to go ahead and do it.
You're a newbie.
I am, so I get a couple of, maybe this is the ignorance of the timing of when the supplemental budget occurs. I'm in support of this, I guess, when I read it. The question that kind of occurred to me is if I backtrack over the last couple of meetings, I'd be confused a little bit why, if this kind of thing is available to fund things like this on a one-time basis, why wouldn't we do something like fund the fire truck at Whitaker as opposed to taking the money out of reserves?
You want me to
Sure, go
answer
ahead.
some of that? One, this money is not assured money. So it really does depend on, as revenues and expenditures occur this year, which then determine how much unanticipated money may or may not be there. And so it's not an assured account. Something with the fire department, why that would be very difficult is if that money's not assured and we won't come back with supplemental budget 1 until after the first of the year, essentially that would mean is for those 6 months, that fire company wouldn't be there, and so it would be defunded for 6 months, may or may not be funded in the next 6 months, and so it's very difficult in that sense for an operation like the fire department to be able to be that flexible with that kind of money.
So the supplemental budget starts January 1.
Yeah, it's usually in December, January,
Okay.
as the books get closed and
Yeah.
the audit is done.
So whereas with this motion, if the money's not there, it's not that we've lost anything, we're just not gaining the.
Okay.
We won't spend this money until it's actually appropriated, if it's appropriated as part of supplemental budget 1. So we won't spend it, or obligate it.
Any other questions, discussion? John, would you like to have the last word on your motion?
No, I think it's pretty well been fleshed out.
Okay.
If the votes are there, it's there.
All right. So all those in favor of the motion as it appears up on the screen, please raise your hand. And I see none opposed, so it passes unanimously. Excellent. So, John, I'm going to give you the floor again to speak to your, what you say may or may not be put in as a motion.
After that.
Sure.
And this, I put it out there just because I wanted to have the discussion. I'm not sure whether or not the city manager feels that a motion is needed here. The idea is that of the money that we kind of did, just what we just did there, we did that last year. And some of that money was allocated to the road fund for the enhanced pothole program. So it's general fund money that is dedicated to the road fund. So at this time, from what I've talked with staff and stuff, it seems like there might be $85,000 left of that Occupy Eugene money that's still in the road fund. And if that's the case, in the past we have liaisoned with the county, because in the past the county's road fund was more flush than it is now. I know that the county's road fund is challenged as well, and so I'm not directing them to say, county, take this money and use it for give us some of your road fund money, but at least put the offer out there and let them know that there is $85,000 of unrestricted money that we are going to be spending on roads. And if they want to give us some of their restricted road fund money, we would happily trade that so that they can use the unrestricted money for something that may benefit Eugene as a whole, perhaps the district attorney's office, or it's not a lot of money, but in these times, we've seen what $85,000 can do. And sometimes it might be able to be leveraged. So I don't know if you would want us to make a motion for you to direct it, or if...
Why don't we have a little bit of discussion and see how it shapes up? So I have Councilor Ortiz.
Oh, no, it's for the next.
You have a whole other topic.
I have, yes.
Gotcha. So Councilor Zelenka and then Councilor Polling.
Well said. So the $85,000 of unspent Occupy Eugene money isn't allocated for a specific purpose, but we had a laundry list of things that we were going to try to do in that motion that we created a couple of months ago with regard to Occupy Eugene, and a lot of them have price tags that are in this range or higher. So if we were to do this and we got restricted monies back, which only could be used for the road fund, then these monies could not be used for those purposes we were talking about for Opportunity Eugene and the Occupy.
Correct. If there's restricted money coming back, we'd have to use it within the restrictions of those dollars. If they're road funds, it would have to be within the rules of the road fund. So I don't remember that entire list, but to answer your question, yes.
As well as the Opportunity Eugene list, which we took monies from as well, didn't we?
Well, it never really had money. It was a
Right.
recommendation.
Could be,
So in that sense, then we wouldn't have any money to deal with those issues if this were restricted.
Correct, unless they fell within those restrictions. Probably
it could go to that if they did that exchange.
So in that case, I can't support this because I think
Road fund.
those things that we said we would do and have yet to figure out exactly what we're going to do with Opportunity Eugene, I think are important things that we said we would do. And so if this were to work out the way that this was intended, then I think we would be precluded from doing that.
Councilor Polling.
Well, I don't think if this were a form of a motion, and even if the city manager recommended it, that I could actually support it. In fact, I'd do what I could to kill it, because the initial discussions at the Budget Committee, I wanted to use some additional monies for LCAS, and the only way I could get the few dollars that I was able to was to agree to split the amount that I wanted, because that money was identified for the wet bed project. So, if this swap does occur, what happens to the wet beds?
Right.
It goes away. So, in a way, LCAS got cheated then. So I think that this is, creative thinking, John. I applaud you for it, but I think it's went the wrong direction this time.
Okay. Councilor Farr.
I think when you're considering whether or not to support the motion, understand that the money did originally come from the road fund, and that the $100,000 was originally intended to be spent on roads. And as far as what would the county do with it instead of spending on roads, they have a laundry list of things themselves that are. I think if we place them in hierarchy with some of the things that we may be looking at for Opportunity or Occupy Eugene, the types of things that would be funded with this, like public safety, for instance, like the DA's office, or some of the other things that John's pointed out, may fall a little bit higher up on the list of things that we would like to spend the money on, more critical services that are ongoing and more expected. So when you're thinking about whether or not to support this, understand that this isn't money that was originally free-floating money. It was originally in the road fund. It would be spent on roads ultimately, and then it would allow the county to have a little bit more flexibility in funding some of the services that they are in the process of cutting. So I'm not arguing for or against it, and I've not actually decided whether or not I'm going to vote for or against it. But think about that. It's not this money was not for Occupy Eugene or for Opportunity Eugene to begin with. It was for roads.
Councilor Pryor.
When we did something similar to this, I think about 4 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago, and it involved $4 million, and at that time it made a lot of sense because the way the budgets were, they needed money for roads. We had money that we wanted to spend on roads, and it was a very good deal. It worked out. This can create the idea that we could maybe try something like that again. The way the landscape, I think, has changed, though, is as our budgets have gotten tighter and tighter, we're looking for as much flexibility in the money as we can. And even though the money came from a road fund, I think the real world says it's been pulled out of the road fund. I would love to put it back into the road fund or spend it on roads, but it may be that the realities have just forced us to have to look at that money more flexibly. I can't believe those kind of words are coming out of my mouth, but that's what this kind of budget situation has pushed us into. So to turn unrestricted dollars into restricted dollars, as smart as it may have been 3 or 4 years ago, not as helpful as it may have been 3 or 4 years ago, doesn't seem as advantageous to me this time around. So I applaud the concept, but for this budget and this reality, I'm less inclined to support it. I don't think I would.
John.
Just to make myself clear on this, my intention wasn't to go against whatever council felt the need for that money was. My intention was that if the money stayed in the road fund and was going to be spent on roads, that we look at the possibility of swapping that with the county. So if we were going to actually have money, general fund unrestricted money, that we were going to put into asphalt, look at the possibility if the county wanted to use restricted funds and swap us. I in no way had an intention of saying this is a higher priority. I'm just saying that if we're buying asphalt with with some general fund monies, let's at least approach the county and see if they would like to use some of their restricted fund money that they can only buy asphalt with and swap so that they have flexibility. That's the intent of the motion. Wherever the council feels the most priority for that money is, that was decided months ago in December, and then how it got spent is being decided by the city manager and staff and bringing that to you. So that's the intent of the motion is if we're buying asphalt, let's see if the county wants to buy it for us, and we'll subcontract from them.
Yeah, Councilor Farr back. Mark.
It's a question regarding it was $100,000 taken out of the road fund to help with Occupy Eugene. Is that right?
What happened was the $300,000 was $35,000 taken from council contingency. The next $100,000 was from parks, which was similar to the previous motion. It was marginal beginning working capital. There was $100,000 that was taken out of from the road fund that had also been marginal beginning working capital, which is a general fund type. And then the last 65 was actually out of gang prevention dollars, which was a general fund piece.
So
that added up to $300,000.
And I guess some of the intent of my question is it wasn't restricted funds taken out of the road fund.
Correct. It's general fund money.
Okay. That helps. Thank you.
Councilor Zelinka.
So, playing forensic accountant, so this is actually general fund money that was reallocated to the road fund, which was then reallocated to the Occupy Eugene, and then subsequently, maybe subsequently to Opportunity Eugene. So it wasn't really road fund money in the first place. But I agree with Councilor Pryor that this is taking unrestricted money and turning it into restricted money, and giving credit where credit's due. This was Councilor Bettman's idea several years ago, and it made a ton of sense. It was a brilliant idea, and it really helped out Lane County when they were in a bind. But I'm not sure that this is a thing to do at this point, especially since it's tied back to some other programs that we've had as priorities. And then secondarily, with a $100 million shortfall at the county, this would be 0.1% help towards getting there. And so I'm not going to support the motion if it is indeed still a motion.
It's actually not a motion at this point. We're just having a discussion. But
Right.
Councilor Farr.
I'm not going to beat it to death.
Okay. Mayor Piercy.
I was just going to make the comment that at the time that we had that discussion as a council, that we had the Occupy was there, and the police chief came and asked for funds for public safety, and we asked the manager where that money may best come from, and he unhappily had to find where the money might best come from, and he supported finding that money because we needed it at the time, and so he brought his best proposals forward for how to meet those needs that we were asked to meet at that time. So it came as a result of a need that was brought to us by largely law enforcement, and the answer was to try to find it where we could, and we found it where we could, and now we have $85,000 left. So that's sort of this. Not everybody was in favor of it, but that's the journey that we've been on. So it's a circuitous route, and actually the truth is we've tried diligently and have not thus far been able to do the wet beds, but that is still something that we promised as a council that we would try to do.
Councilor Farr.
Well, it seems a bit circuitous to say that law enforcement asked us to give them $300,000. That's not the way quite the way I recall it. But the way John is explaining it, the money doesn't show up unless it's actually unless it's actually going to be spent on asphalt anyway. So really, what it does in effect is gives the county a tiny 1/100th of 1%. Is that the number, Alan?
1/10 of 1%.
1/10, excuse me. Not quite that. Of flexibility, and takes it away from us. So I guess it's not that big a deal. Let's just drop it.
Anyone else like to comment? I'll just comment and say, I appreciate John having us think about these things, and while I'm suspecting you're not going to try and make a formal motion, I don't want to take words out of your mouth.
Probably not.
Okay.
Wise choice.
Just testing. I think it's very good food for thought for the council and the city manager as we get, particularly when you get to the supplemental budget and see how things are shaken down in the county, and if there's still an opportunity to do something creative along those lines. So, did you want to say anything else before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, again, it was just to get people's eyes opened up. In these tight budgetary times, I know staff is dedicated and looks at all funds and knows the restrictions on all funds, and it's just due diligence to see where we can try and fund needs. There have been several times in the past where there have been times in the past where we did similar swaps like this. We've looked at other funds for that historically we wouldn't think would be, we've used some stormwater funds to help with street trees, because there is a nexus and stuff there. So it's just, look at everything. Don't just look in the general fund, because there's several other pages in this book that we are also being asked to approve and amend if possible. So that's all it was just let's take a look at things and see what best we can do. So I won't put a motion forward, but if it does come down to it and you're spending it on asphalt, maybe ask them down the road.
Great. So I believe Councilor Ortiz would like to be in the queue.
Well, I know we weren't, and I really haven't thought of a motion or where the money would come from, but was it Tuesday that a group of us spent the day with a lot of the social service providers? And it wasn't the first time, Claire helped me with this, that we've heard that Buckley House is running out of money for their sobering station. Is that correct?
I heard that their Buckley House funding is threatened. Yeah.
Yes. And so, and I know how that impacts us personally in the city of Eugene. I know that last year, when their funding was failing, or when they had come to the end of their money, Steve Medillo did a really good job of going to all the different providers and soliciting donations from different organizations. And I don't know how that's going to play out in the next year, and I don't know, if we want to discuss it more in detail here, because I don't have any of the numbers or really a proposed motion, but I really would like to see if we could give, if anybody thought it'd be worth, asking John to make sure that we're a participant in that conversation if it comes up again, or if Chief Kearns has looked at this as part of his budget. I think it really does impact our community if we don't have anybody any place to take our people who are inebriated outside of the emergency room, or leaving them laying at the corner of where they've fallen.
Absolutely, we're still in those conversations, and this for me would fall under that. There may be several county outfalls that the council is going to want to talk about. And so as the county finishes up their budget process, we may want to have those conversations. And as part of SB1, that would be the opportunity to actually know the details of any information. And if the council would like to do anything from a financial standpoint, that would be the right time to do it, because we would have all the information. We would know whether or not there was federal or state dollars that were coming into the county as part of their bridge. We would know what their budget actually is, and then any of those would be great conversations. But we're very much involved in those conversations.
Okay, because I just want to make sure that that they are not, that like their funding doesn't fall away and all their employees leave, and then okay, here's some money now, because we have dozens of people unable to find them a place to be.
Yeah, I think we'll know. We'll know enough in time that shouldn't happen.
Okay, because I really feel I just the manager of Buckley hasn't spoken to it. I think, it's been around the conversation. I mean, obviously, the morale is pretty low at the Human Services Commission, and everybody knows there's no more money, and the ones that are able to get a portion of what they've been funded are very grateful for it. But, I personally, there's some things that are Eugene-centric that I think if we're going to be putting dollars into the Human Services Commission or from this budget committee, that we need to make sure that we address the needs of our community and not really worry about the larger picture, because it affects our quality of life.
Councilor Zelinka.
Yeah, I would support that, bringing that back and continue that conversation, because the Buckley House is a unique service and a very important service that does serve the population in our community, and especially in Eugene, and would hate to see it go away or have an interruption of funding so that, in effect, went away and then had to get resurrected. That'd even be worse.
Does everyone know what Buckley House is, what we're referring to in this conversation? Is anyone not familiar? Okay, just want to make sure. Does I realize?
And everybody knows it's sobering and not detox that we're talking about,
Yes, the sobering station.
not detox.
Yeah, and they're actually doing pretty good work as far as looking at other avenues for funding for their detox, for their in-house detox. And they're looking at a medical model where they would have a nurse 24/7, where they could actually bill like the Oregon Health Plan or any private insurances, which I think is really a path for sustainability for that portion of it. But I think the other portion of it is what's at risk.
All right, so now's the time that I asked. Does anyone else have any motions that they would like to bring forward before we move to the final motion for recommending the budget as amended to the City Council? No, don't see any. All right. Hey, Pavel, are you able to put or whoever's, is that you, Mia? Sorry. Okay. So we actually have two motions that we passed. There's one recommending our FY13 budget as amended to the city manager, and then we are also responsible for moving to recommend the budget for the Eugene Urban Renewal Agency, which we don't actually discuss because we're not privileged to amend that in any way. We are. John says we can.
Oh, sure.
No? Do you want to propose any amendments to it?
I'll let that.
All right. So we don't generally have any amendments to propose on that. And Mia is trying to catch up with us on the big screen there. But I will review for you all the motions that we passed to amend the proposed FY13 budget include, there they are. The $175,000 going back to the Human Services Commission, $65,000 put back to Animal Services, $317,000 out of Reserve for Revenue shortfall to keep the second fire company open at Fire Station 2. Then the motion we passed this evening regarding funding to LCOG and LRAPA. And so those...
There's one more.
You've got to insert the last one.
Yep.
Trying to get it up there.
And then the other one we passed this evening, the $100,000 from beginning marketing and working capital to be transferred after the $900,000 to parks for operation and maintenance.
That's actually not a budget amendment. That's a recommendation to the City Council to do that.
You're not actually appropriating money now.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right.
Thank you.
So we've passed that. It doesn't need to be...
It's non-binding. It's a
Reconsidered in
recommendation
any way.
that the
Okay.
City Council does that at
Thank you.
SB1 from the citizen members and the body as a whole.
So I'm going to read our formal motion and ask for someone to move and second. So the formal motion is to Move that the Budget Committee recommend the Eugene City Council the FY13 budget for the City of Eugene that consists of the City Manager's proposed FY13 budget, including the property tax levies and/or rates contained therein, amended to reflect appropriations for the prior year encumbrances and prior year capital projects, and the following amendments as they appear on the screen.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. And any opposed? And we have one in opposition. Then our second formal motion regarding the Urban Renewal Agency budget, move that the Budget Committee recommend to the Eugene City Council, acting as the Urban Renewal Agency Board of Directors, the FY13 budget for the Eugene Urban Renewal Agency that consists of the City Manager's FY13 proposed budget, including the property tax levies and/or rates contained therein, amended to reflect appropriations for the prior year's encumbrances and prior year capital projects.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And looks like none opposed. That passes unanimously. Excellent. We have finished that official business. City Manager.
Is this the right time to recognize the two of you?
Hold that thought.
Okay.
So I just wanted to offer you all some time here. If you had things you wanted to share at this table as opposed to via email or in a conversation with finance staff or the city manager about this kind of rather different process that we went through in terms of the timing of these budget discussions, how many we had, and just give you an opportunity to have that conversation if you would like at this point. Councilor Ortiz.
So this is my 8th budget committee assignment as a counselor for the City of Eugene, and it's always been an interesting journey because I understand that we're constantly trying to reset the dial and look to try and make sure that we provide services with a lesser amount of money. And so I really don't have any comments on the budget process itself, but I'm just kind of glad we're done with it. Because there's not a whole lot, we can only move the deck chairs so far, and I think that the staff did a pretty good job. I would have preferred to have more money to do more things with, but that wasn't reality. So thank you, John, Sarah, and staff.
Councilor Polling.
I'd just like to recognize John and all the city staff that's worked on this, get us through this process as smoothly as it has been. And as far as the new way we approached the budget process, I don't know if it felt awkward, but I don't know if it's because it was something new and we're just not used to it. I guess I'd be willing to try it one more year. John probably would disagree with me on that, but maybe it's just because it's something different. Let's give it another try and see how it goes. The one complaint that I do have is when we have meetings back to back, and I sent an email out on this when it happened, is trying to get staff to get out of here at 8, 9 o'clock at night and do the turnaround on the requests for information and get it to us in a timely fashion. Like I said, some of us don't live by our computers or carry them with us. I'm kind of old school with paper and pencil still, and we don't have the opportunity to read the email that comes out at 4:30 for a 5:30 budget committee meeting. So if at all, right on my hand. If at all possible, let's try to avoid back-to-back nights in the future.
Who else is next?
Mark.
Mark.
Well, so this is obviously my first time through the budget process and not knowing any different how it has been in years past, even though I've watched. I guess one of my impressions would be that it would have been nice to have a bit more time, and primarily a bit more time for the release of the full budget document, to have time to kind of dig into that and review it more. So, but I appreciate all the information. I thought staff was great. I was provided great information and really appreciate all the work. So, thank you.
I put myself in the queue.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So Shanda couldn't be here this evening, so John is playing vice chair. So I just wanted to echo a little bit of what Councilor Polling said about the quick turnaround time on a back-to-back meeting, and one other way to deal with that, which maybe then just is the same result, is to ask the chair, can we not consider the items that we just got the information about at that meeting? And I would also I'd like to go back to a little, even though, it's good to save paper and to reduce costs, I think the new Budget Committee members did miss out on some of the background information and the other supporting materials that we've traditionally gotten in our big, thick document. And so I would lean towards going back to providing that information. I think more information is better, and I think John is a great example of someone who really uses that information in that document to good effect, and by not having it there, then we just preclude that possibility. So that was my 2 cents at this point. Councilor Pryor.
Thanks. First thought, I think budgeting by outcomes, which we adopted about 4 years ago, has been, to me, a tremendous success. I think this budget is a good representation of how that process works and how it works well, particularly with the Budget Committee that's operating on a directional policy level. Second thought, I agree, probably just in the interest of being a deliberate Budget Committee, we should probably have the full budget. I mean, the Budget Committee member in its fiduciary role should have the full budget as a document. And even if it's a download, that would be a good thing. Third thing, my biggest concern, maybe back-to-back meetings, not so much for me, but 3.5-hour meetings. There was a number of occasions where you get to 9 o'clock and you're so punchy you don't know what you're voting on anymore. I'd almost rather have more meetings and have them be shorter so that we can actually be in a good state of mind as we work through this process. That's my personal preference. And the last thing is, we're always in a wrestling match between what is the role of the city councilors, what is the role of the Budget Committee, and what is the role of the budget. And I talked about this at the very beginning. And I don't want the Budget Committee to feel that they can't dive in and look at things, but it's important for the Budget Committee to recognize that it is helping the city council at the broader scale decide what we should be doing and not getting caught up in individual items. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be looking at individual items, because there may be new eyes that can see fresh things, but the way the process went this year, I thought went very well for trying to keep us at that level. And so having the A part, where we were really doing that, and I thought we were doing it very well, and maybe the B part, which some of us who like the number part could be maybe a little bit more robust, maybe would be the only change I would make. But overall, I think this process went really well, and we always learn as we go.
Great. John.
My take would be, I've sat through a lot of them back when each department head came up and gave their spiel, and we sat in meetings after meetings, and I think that the phasing out of that was good. I think the bringing us in early when you had, this is kind of what my thought process is. I want to know how you guys, what's your temperature on that? I thought that was an excellent idea. Some of the things that I wasn't so comfortable with was have been brought up. One is the abbreviated book. There was a lot of valuable information in the book that isn't there now. There's tables there, and there needs, as far as a citizen member of the Budget Committee, it needs a little bit more explanation than just a spreadsheet. And so I think that that's a valuable part. The other thing that I had concerns with, and I still have concerns with, was the accelerated time frame of this budget process. In all of the other years, our budgets were close to the other agency around as far as time frames and deliberations. So we kind of had a little bit of more of a feel as to what some of the other needs throughout the whole community are. I mean, we just yesterday saw what's coming down from the county. In the past, we would be starting our deliberations usually the end of April. We'd get the book at the end of April, and it would be a congruent thing, and that has been advantageous in the past. We've seen overlapping needs that the citizens of Eugene felt we needed to address, even if the county couldn't. So that's one of the things that I was uncomfortable with this year.
Councilor Zink.
So I'd like to thank Claire for doing an excellent job this year, and staff for all the work that they did pull this together in a timely fashion. I like the early time frame. I thought the input we provided has more meaning then. As far as the process is concerned, this is my 16th budget, so they all pretty much look the same to me, regardless, and they all ended up exactly the same, jockeying in the last 2 meetings where everything happened. So to me, they all look pretty much the same, regardless of how we did them, in terms of process and the amount of time that we spent dealing with the issues. So I didn't think we got short-shrifted there. As far as the document's concerned, I think the idea of a download's a good one, or if someone requests the document, that you give it to them. I don't think everybody needs to get the document. But I do definitely think that the new people on the budget committee should get the full document and be able to have access to it, because I think it's valuable to see the whole thing when you're first starting out, to be able to get a sense of it all. And then you can decide if you want to come back for a second year after you've read that.
Councilor Farr.
Well, Ellen, you saved me a question. I was going to ask you how many years you've been on the budget committee. 16. That's remarkable. I remember when I first was on the budget committee, you seemed like Noah at the time. It's been a long time indeed. But the point I wanted to make is that that
was because I was herding cats.
Well, we did have some tough budgets. You know, we had budgets that took us all the way to June, the last week of June. So getting it over with in April is remarkable. Not getting it over with, but getting through the process. But I just wanted to make a comment that the new members of the budget committee this year, my observation was that y'all really contributed at a very high level. You stepped into the flow of things very quickly, very early, and you're able to contribute in a way that I've never really witnessed before for a first-time crew of budget members. So, good job, congratulations. So
High five, team.
next year, I'd recommend let's take this thing into June so we can enjoy these guys more. Thank you very much.
That's
Or not.
Laura.
So this was obviously my first time going through this as well. I very much I think it was a great process. I really appreciate just the context, both that the city manager's report provided. The staff has been great about answering questions and answering them quickly. I don't really know how to feel about the time frame because I haven't experienced anything else. In one respect, I liked the early time frame, and I liked doing it before everybody else was done because it felt a little more proactive rather than reactive, and I liked that. On the other hand, I do see that there are challenges, especially when we're talking about, it did feel sometimes like we were making budgetary decisions, in particular about LCAS, for example, before the alternative program had even come close to being fleshed out, and that is a little frustrating. So I think perhaps if we're going to do it earlier, then some of those other things perhaps need to start earlier too, in terms of working through what are those alternative structures going to look like. And finally, I would just agree with Councilor Pryor that for me, more meetings, a little shorter would be better. I definitely felt like I hit a wall at a certain point, and it was like, sure, that sounds good, let's get out of here. And that's probably not effective. So I would probably be in agreement with the back-to-back. For me, was not as much of an issue, maybe because I didn't have a particular motion or question that I needed to turn around quickly. But I did find that I got to a point where I was not valuable anymore. So that would be my 2 cents. But it was a great process, and I appreciate all the staff's very hard work on this. Thank you.
8 o'clock is our next wall.
Yeah, that's right. 5 minutes. Wrap it up. I don't want to cut anyone off, though. So, well, if anyone else would like to speak to the process in general, you certainly still have an opportunity. But also, as I said, staff will be sending out a survey to solicit your feedback via email. And also, if you think of other things that you want to share, I know Mia and the rest of the staff are very generous with their time, and feel free to pick up the phone or send them another email, particularly folks who are continuing on and will be part of this process next year, so that you can influence how that comes out for next year. So now we get to deal with the fact that not all of us will be returning next year. So Shanda, who couldn't be here this evening, she had a crunch at work. I believe she is going off the Budget Committee, so Shanda, who is our vice chair, will be going, and then also Mr. Borofsky, who's been on for so many years now, and I am going off as well. So you're losing 3 folks. Doug's going to be the old timer in terms of Citizen Budget Committee members. And the other thing I wanted to point out for that is I also serve on the Human Services Commission, and I serve on that by virtue of the fact that I serve on this body. So one of the Citizen Budget Committee members will be asked to serve on that body. My term ends at the end of June, so I'll be on the HSC for the next 2 months. But then we will need to appoint a citizen member of the Budget Committee. I'm assuming it needs to be a citizen member. And if anyone wants to speak to me about service on that body, I'm very open to doing that. It's been a really eye-opening experience. I've learned a lot. I really had no background in human services before I went over there, and it's really put me in touch with a part of the community that I hadn't been in touch with before, and it's been heartbreaking and fulfilling all at the same time. So I just wanted to share that. So were you raising your hand to speak?
Yes, I did.
Councilor Ortiz.
Thank you. Well, you're not getting off the hook that easily. I understand that both you and John Borofsky have reapplied to be on these.
Yes, but we discovered a technicality that had gone missing somewhere in the reformatting of documents. And John, do you want to tell them what you discovered?
Yeah. So in the past, there was a 2-term limit, 2 consecutive terms, and I remembered that. And so when I looked at the applications, I think when they changed the formatting around to go from the fall, appointing in the fall to appointing at fiscal year end, somehow that got changed. So I was doing a little checking yesterday to see where, as far as, because I applied for a couple different positions, and where I might land, thinking that this may be my last meeting. They said, "Oh no, the person in city manager said, no, there doesn't seem to be anything in there, but you might want to check with finance." And so I called over and talked to Pavel, and Pavel says, I don't know, but I'll do some checking. And at about 5 o'clock last night, the phone rang and said, yes, it's actually a codified piece of thing that there's 2-term limits. So we won't be here. And so
Yeah, John and I both reapplied to come back on.
Yeah, and got a lot of
so those votes are gone.
No one would.
Yeah.
So thank John
Yeah.
for keeping us all honest.
Nobody would have noticed.
Someone might have noticed at some point, and that would have been a big boo-boo. So we wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
John.
So I guess at this point, what I would like to say is, so this is the 7th year that I've been on it, and I sat in the back of the room for the first 2 before that. And I would just like to say thanks to the staff. It's been a real pleasure getting to know all of the staff, and I admire the professional work that they do, especially finance. When I got on the board or the commission here, it was one of my big things was the roads, because back 7-8 years ago, the road fund was really in trouble, and I'm happy to say that we've come a long way on that. I've learned a lot. I've learned acronyms, and I really don't know where I'm going to use the OPEB acronym in a sentence much after I get off this committee. There's nobody else that would know what that is. I'd like to thank the council for putting up with my minutiae and digging into the budget and asking stupid questions, and especially staff. Thanks for putting up with all of my questions, and thanks for the ride. And now I'm a citizen.
We're not adjourned yet.
I'm only
We're
on one
until
committee.
June.
Yeah.
Councilor Taylor.
I want to say thanks to Claire and John. And John, I thought you were a staff member for years.
No, yeah, because I sat out there for 2 years before I got on the committee.
That person, I thought,
What department's he
so
with?
interested. Then I found out you weren't a staff member.
Oh, gosh. That's great.
But you've done a good job. Thank you.
So, John, you had wanted to.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I also want to just thank the entire committee for the process this year, and thank you for being willing to do something a little bit different from our perspective. Overall, it went really well, and we do appreciate some of that upfront look. I want to thank our staff. Christy and the finance team really do a marvelous job. What seems to look relatively easy actually is the culmination of literally thousands of staff hours putting together the budget. And they work hard, and during that season they work late and they work weekends. And we just really appreciate their work, and I know you do too. Next year, also particularly for budget community members, anytime through the year if you have questions, the Budget Buddy system is still in place. Feel free to contact them at any time and talk about whatever you want to talk about. And it's just an opportunity to get clarification, so I would encourage that. And next year's budget, we'll be thinking hard about that. Some of it still may be additionally different, only because, as you remember, there's still a gap that we're going to have to deal with next year, and we don't know what that will be. But it will be there, and we'll get through that fine, and we'll work through it, and there'll be hard decisions to make and some really challenging times, but that'll be okay. We'll kind of work our way through that. And then I just also wanted to say thanks to the both of you. It's amazing the amount of experience that both of you have brought in leadership into the Budget Committee over the 4 years I've been here, and I know our staff very much appreciates both of you. John, asking the good questions and sort of delving through keeps us accountable, which is fabulous. Claire, we just appreciate your compassion about so many things. It makes a huge difference in this community, so thank you both for all of that work.
Well, I really very much have enjoyed working with the finance staff, and I've also really enjoyed working with you, John and Sarah. I think you guys have really brought a new energy to the city that we're all benefiting from. And I want to thank the city councilors and the mayor for your great service to the community. You guys have a really tough job. As a citizen budget committee member, we really have a lot of liberty in terms of what opinions we bring forward and what things we push for. We don't have a constituency per se to be accountable to, and you all do. And I think you handle yourselves just beautifully, and I really appreciate your dedication to the city. So I just wanted to share that. And then I really want to thank the Citizen Budget Committee members as well. It's, unpaid volunteer work that, you just do because you've been asked to. You find it interesting, hopefully. And it's a really important service to the community. This is, public funding, and the public needs to be part of the process, and you bring that part to it in a really important way, and I think it's a really important job, and I want to thank you all for doing it, and really encourage each of you to consider putting your names forward as chair and vice chair. I think any one of you would do an excellent job, and you'll find working with staff, they just make it really easy to work through the scheduling and the dynamics, and I just really appreciate the opportunity. I only found out this afternoon about this term limit thing, and I had really mixed feelings about it when Mia called me and gave me the news, and I told a friend of mine, I said, I kind of feel like I've been kicked off the football team. I'm glad I don't have to take the hits anymore, but I'm sad to be on the sidelines. So
I have one question then. If you and John and Shanda are all leaving and won't be at our very first next budget committee for the next fiscal year, should we maybe think about electing officers tonight? Well, or we have a contact point for the budget committee and the finance staff.
The only reason I would hesitate to suggest that is none of the citizen members have had an opportunity really to consider that question. So, they might have thought about it independently, but.
10 minutes.
I only have 3 new members.
4.
Who wants to be chair?
That's the first question. Is anybody willing to do it?
It's just.
I think it's a good suggestion. The only other thing is that, I guess you'd have 3 more citizen members, presumably they'd be brand new and they may not be thinking they want to step up. So.
And just as process, I think you could do an interim chair, but the new budget committee would have to be voted on by the budget committee that is seated for that year.
That makes sense, too.
Right?
Yeah, and it would probably be good to do an overview of what the responsibilities are as well.
You got to write the cue for vice chair.
So I guess I would lean towards finding another approach to that process rather than trying to do it this evening. But I appreciate the suggestion. So unless there's strong feelings to go in another direction, no.
So think about it because we'll be asking.
Yes.
Was Shonda one of the 3 vacancies?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, so there was this interim time where we kind of had staggered some unusual terms, and so Shanda's term wasn't a full.
This was her third term.
It
This
was
was
her
her
third
third year.
year?
Yep.
No, she didn't serve a full term. She
She came into a vacancy.
Okay.
Okay.
Into a vacancy. Okay.
That's right. So, any last words for the good of the order?
But, if you could send that to us, I think that would be really helpful, because if it is something to consider in the future, it'd be helpful to know what we're considering.
And then, again, a good time, George, to do that. A lot of times when SB1 comes out, there's a citizen member that reviews, that goes over what is going to be in the supplemental budget, and that might be an appropriate time to elect a chair.
I was just looking for,
Yeah.
to keep, kind of a consistent flow going, and so the staff has someone to kind of use as a focal point as far as the citizen members, as well as get things kicked off next year, so.
And like I said, our terms don't end till June, so we are still officially on board. And again, at some point in there, though, between June and July, an HSC appointee will need to happen. And I don't know if the mayor does that. And again, I'm you have my email. Some of you have my cell phone number. I'm very happy to offer, be a consultant just on process, if that's helpful to anyone who's considering being chair, and I would think John as well. No, he doesn't want to talk to you. Doug, and then Councilor Ortiz.
The application deadline for commissions was the end of March.
Correct.
Did staff receive at least 3?
Oh, yeah.
We got a bunch.
Yeah, we got a bunch.
Now you got to go back over them all. Pull me and John out of that pile. Councilor Ortiz and then Councilor Farr.
So, so because John and Claire did apply, and they are not eligible for this position, are they eligible for other positions within the boards and commissions?
Other boards and commissions? I would
Even though we didn't apply.
Even though you didn't apply for the specific commission or board, they are eligible, are they not?
like for like a.
I mean, if they didn't apply
Or
for it,
for human rights or for police commission?
Sure.
if they didn't apply,
But they hadn't, I don't know, because they haven't put in an application. I mean, you have to
But
create that cycle.
no, but we can appoint anybody who puts in an application.
We had to fill in a general application, and then John did one for an extra questionnaire for planning and budget, and I did an extra questionnaire for budget.
Okay, well then, that's good.
Okay.
you had to apply for the board and commission.
Well, no, so
I think
And then
no,
that's-
but we've pulled people from other applications at different times. Yes, we have. And I don't know if it was just because it was a police commission and El Rapa that the mayor had recommended and then we appoint, or if it's just a blanket.
Well, could staff double
applied
check
for that
on
position.
the propriety?
Let's answer that
Yeah,
question.
we'll go back and take a
Okay.
look at that and send something out.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Farr.
Thank you. This is an extraordinary situation, and we have the standard process for selecting members, new budget committee members, seems to be thrown awry by this extraordinary situation. I think I would like to look into what it would take to extend the selection of the new budget committee members to take into account the fact that most of us have made decisions already regarding who we want to reappoint for the budget committee. So I would like to, I don't know if it's appropriate at this point for a motion, but to extend it would not be appropriate at this point for a motion, but I would like to consider extending selection of the new Budget Committee members because of the extraordinary situation, maybe extended by 30 days to give council a chance to look at the applications afresh and reconsider interviews and I'm not suggesting at this point that we would open applications again for Budget Committee, but to look again at the interviews, because I, for one, had, and I've not seen the count on it, but I, for one, had suggested that we reappoint. So I have 2 blanks in my mind right now.
What we can do, if it would be helpful, within the next day or 2, we can take all this conversation, come back to you with either what options are or sort of the whole situation, and then you can choose to take action as a council at that point. So we'll just give you all the information. And
I will bide my time.
yeah.
Thank you.
But we can do that within the next couple of
Interims.
days.
Just think of us for interims.
Mark.
And I just wanted to throw out there that I do have an interest and a willingness to serve in one of the either vice chair or chair positions for further consideration when we have that conversation. And I also have an interest, and I'll talk to Claire more about the Human Services Commission. So I have served as a chair and vice chair on a nonprofit board in the past, and am familiar with some of the rules and things. So anyway,
Great. Mayor Piercy.
I just wanted to just put in the mix of thinking that that sort of shifts whether they if they knew that they might have applied for something else. So it sort of opens more than one committee kind of discussion. So you just have to look at the whole thing.
We'll take all that into consideration when we come back with the council with.
Thank you.
That's good.
Darn you.
Can we adjourn?
Or darn it.
Like I said, mixed feelings.
Thanks, John.
Try too hard? Is that what I heard?
Okay, well, I'm going to close this meeting of the Budget Committee, and thank you all so much. We are adjourned.